Hello, RELEX Talks is our monthly LinkedIn live series. We are live on the second Wednesday of every month, and we bring you the latest and most interesting topics in the world of retail, CPG, and more. Thank you to the Let's Talk supply chain team for helping to make this event possible. My name is Paty Lopez, and I am Senior Solution Principal in LATAM for RELEX. Today, Jay and Jake are here with me, and I'm going to let them to present themselves. So, Jay?
Yeah, thanks, Paty. So my name's Jay Hawkins. I'm the head of product for assortment and insights here at RELEX. I've been with the business since 2015. I manage a team of product managers and development managers who are responsible for building out our assortment, clustering, and BI reporting solutions.
Thank you, Jay. Jake?
I'm Jake Busch. I'm a strategic principal here at RELEX. I have experience working with North America retailers and CPGs to solve their category management, assortment, and space solutions. I've also spent some time in industry working at a large big box retailer here in the US.
Thank you, guys. Well, let's start talking about this great topic, which is assortment. Have you ever thought about how many decisions we need to take every day? I mean, they seem that they increase every day, and sometimes it may become overwhelming. So how can we make these things simpler? Even though summer starts in June, up to this point, I have already bought like more than 20 ice creams. There are a lot. And every time it's a new decision for me. We need to add this decision to the grocery list, to the food, to whatever we need to decide every day. And when you think about the shoppers, it's something very important for them, because this choice overload, which is increasing every day, has an impact on how we buy. And that's why retailers need to sophisticate the way that they decide their assortment in their stores. So let's learn today from Jay and Jake, how can retailers around the world can solve these paradox of choice? So let's start with you, Jay. For the audience today, can you explain what do we mean when we talk about assortment rationalization?
Yeah, of course. And I'm really glad we chose the theme of ice cream here. So I'm living in the Cheshire in the UK, and we have a couple of very good ice cream farms near to us. So I 100% can resonate with this particular challenge of choice. So for those of you that don't know, assortment rationalization is the process that retailers take when they're looking to remove products from their assortment. And it's typically done as part of the category review process. So this can be done because potentially products are being discontinued. It could be because they're unwanted in the assortment. They might be slow or poor performing. It could even be, well, in most cases, actually, it's because the product is duplicative. So it is not generating incremental sales. So there's some reasons why a retailer may want to reduce or remove some of their assortment. So if we take the example of ice cream from our theme, imagine a retailer has 5 different varieties of chocolate ice cream. It's unlikely that all 5 are adding incrementally to their sales, but they will be taking up precious space within the chiller cabinet or the freezer cabinet. So it could be that if some of those varieties were removed, that demand would transfer to other products within the assortment. So we're really looking at sort of incremental sales here. And assortment rationalization doesn't necessarily result in a net reduction of assortments. It could be that you rationalize 5 or 10% of your assortment and then replace that with new product development or product innovation or private label brands. So it doesn't always necessarily mean a cut of assortment. Probably quite an important thing to work out, to sort of mention, sorry. Yeah, so hopefully that answers the question.
Perfect. Well, Jake, we have been hearing about a lot of retailers wanting to rationalize their assortments. Do you have any indication why this has become somewhat a hot topic in recent times?
I think we've been hearing about this for quite some time, and you think about what everyone's gone through the last number of years. We've seen a lot of shift from in-store shopping to online shopping, and really also wanting to make sure that the retailers strive to have everything that the customer may want to come in and shop. And so that brings in this SKU proliferation that we're seeing on the shelves today. And so it's kind of this goal to make sure I can have whatever you could possibly want as you think about the endless aisle that exists. But when we get into a space-constrained store in brick and mortar, it's a little bit harder to actually make that happen because I can't actually have everything I possibly want to have. In addition to that, I think we're seeing the customers kind of change some of their shopping behaviors. Especially today, value is a really key driver. We're seeing a lot of focus around more own brand, so launching new own brand items, and that all means I need to find space for that on the shelf. So that's going to drive some type of rationalization. As Jay just said, it may not be reducing the total SKU count, but I need to make room for these new items that are coming in. And we all know that assortment is one of the most important things that you can do. It's one of the hardest things to really get right as you think about the retailing and the customer experience. And so I think making sure that assortment is correct, that it's resonating, that it has all the appropriate needs that the customer is looking for, but also makes it easy for them to shop and make those decisions is really kind of a tough balance to ultimately get to. And to your story about your 20 ice cream flavors, or even add I have a toddler and getting him to make a decision on what he wants for dinner. Give him a lot of options. He's going to be paralyzed and not make a decision. You give him two, he can very quickly tell you what he wants. So I think people are looking for that from their shopping experience as well.
Yeah, and just to build on that, Jake, we've seen a lot recently around the sort of consumer loyalty to particular brands or chains is starting to dilute a little bit, and they're really being driven by value and price. And so one of the sort of benefits that assortment rationalization will do is it'll sort of enable retailers to sort of channel or funnel more sales through a smaller amount of SKUs, which ultimately gives them more leverage when it comes to negotiating prices with suppliers, so they can really drive that purchase price down and give the consumers that value that they're so craving in sort of today's market.
That's a good point there, Jay. Something that didn't kind of took a lens more from the customer standpoint of what they're looking for, but also on the retailers, costs are going up and up and up. Whether that is cost of labor in stores to restock shelves, whether that's cost of moving things through the supply chain from your DCs to your stores, and assortment rationalization can also play a role in helping reduce some of those costs. So making sure that do we need free up space on the shelf to be able to face out items that are moving faster that the customer is truly looking for, or how do we, to your point, negotiate better with those suppliers? So from a customer standpoint, getting the right offering, but even from a supply chain standpoint, being able to reduce those costs, ultimately improve margin, can be really driven off of an assortment rationalization practice.
Interesting. Jay, what do you think that are the benefits for retailers that they can expect from having assortment rationalization?
Yeah, so there's a huge range of benefits that retailers can expect to see from rationalizing their range, and they're both kind of direct and indirect. So benefits that they could potentially see right away versus enabling opportunities and benefits from that particular exercise. I mean, one of them that kind of strikes me right off the bat is that removing duplication from the range. So we are, by removing that duplication that we've got, we are freeing up capital in likely slow moving lines. So that capital can then be reinvested in other areas such as new product development. So I think that's a real big benefit to sort of drive that turnover of the products in store. But then a lot of the benefits are linked to what is done with the space that is freed up. So if we were to take a simple rationalization exercise, for example, where we have a net reduction of assortment, then what we do with that space is really, really important. So if we simply increase the facings of our top performing products, then we're likely to, as well as reducing duplication and freeing up capital, we're likely to see inventory turnover increases quite significantly because we're driving the same amount of volume through less product. we're likely to see better availability because there is now more space for those top performing products on the shelf to make sure that we're sort of meeting our inventory targets. And it's well documented that increased availability, of course, leads to increased sales as well. So they're all the kind of benefits that retailers can expect from a simple assortment rationalization exercise where we're seeing a net reduction of SKUs. However, there's also benefits on the other side of that, which is where the space is utilized for new product development. So if we are removing those slow removing lines from the assortment and we're filling that space with new product developments, it gives us a better chance at sort of those driving increased sales and increased profits through unique products that don't cannibalize or duplicate any of the existing range and are sort of truly unique in the eyes of the customer. So that kind of scenario would tend to lead to not only the sort of better availability, but then you would also see increases in sales, increases in profit, increases in customer satisfaction. So there are lots of benefits that the retailers can get from this exercise, regardless of whether it's a net reduction in assortment or whether it's simply just sort of getting those slow moving products or those duplicative products out of the assortment and replacing them with unique products.
Thank you, Jay. Jake, question for you. Jay was talking about reducing the number of SKUs that we have available at store. How can I rationalize my assortment without having negative impacts? I mean, how can I avoid losing sales, profit, customer satisfaction? Are there any risks there?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of risk if this doesn't go well. I think we've seen a number of case studies in the marketplace across different types of retailers that have had large SKU reduction initiatives and kind of missed the mark on it and really upset the customers coming in there and saw a lot of poor results. So the risk of doing this wrong is quite large, which is why you need to have really a solid kind of a data-driven approach of how do I ultimately rationalize those appropriate SKUs. So part of that is you want to reduce duplication. We want to understand which items are maybe a margin drag on us. And the way that we can really accomplish that is a couple different ways. One of the things that we like to first really look at is, let's leverage, a forecast data versus just completely relying on historical sales. Historical definitely plays a role, but being able to understand, hey, we have a great forecast that's looking at weather patterns, looking at the trends and driving things forward. Let's use that to make our decisions versus looking backwards. Also being able to understand, what does this item cost to us? And part of that is, to acquire it, what does it cost from the manufacturer? But, what does supply chain cost to move it through the supply chain ultimately to the stores? Is there more handling costs? Do we get vendor funding on that? How do we take that all into account to evaluate how effective is this item for us in terms of driving margin and benefit from a profit standpoint? So really, sometimes we just look at the cost of goods sold. We may make different decisions if we actually start looking at, hey, what does the total picture of that look like? So that's kind of one of the things that we really encourage customers to look at is not just the cost, but the total picture with that future looking forecast. Ultimately, we also need to understand how is the customer shopping and what does this item really serve for them? Is it really unique? Or is it something that they can substitute out of and pick something else if we were to remove that item? So that's where we like to look at a customer decision tree. So understanding what are the choices that are happening through the shopping journey, as well as understanding, any demand transference or substitutability that may come with those items. And that's where we get into a lot of exciting talks around, kind of future state of how does, AI and ML really drive the benefits, leveraging, demand transfers or customer decision tree process to make sure we're making the appropriate decisions.
Okay.
And just to add to that, sorry, Paty, I think the key really is to combine those approaches, looking at the true profitability of products, looking at that activity-based costing. So what are all those costs? What are all of those revenues involved with getting that product right the way from the supplier through to the DC, out to the store, out to the customer? What's everything that's involved in that? And to be able to calculate that reliably, and that gives us our profit. But as Jake was saying, that's only kind of one side of the coin. Then what we also want to do is look at how that the customer is shopping the particular category, and what are their key need states. It could be that something is removed from the assortment because it has low profitability, but if that represents a really important need state, it could have implications on the wider sort of basket, and actually, in its worst case, shoppers walking out of those stores to go to somewhere else where they can do their full shop. So yeah, I think the key is really sort of balancing those approaches to rationalization.
Jake mentioned something, and this question goes for you, Jay. He mentioned about demand transference. How do demand transfers and other factors impact these rationalization decisions?
Yeah, it's demand transference is a really, really important factor when it comes to assortment rationalization. And I guess just to make sure we're on the same page, when we talk about demand transfer, we're referring to demand that moves from a removed product to another product within the assortment. And that's really important because that is the key to sales preservation, really, from this rationalization exercise. If we're moving products, if we're removing products that have no demand transference, so they are unique, then we are going to lose the sales. It doesn't matter if it's $100, $1,000, $100,000. We're going to lose that revenue and those sales from the business. So then becomes this really important factor of knowing and estimating where that demand is likely to transfer. So if we go back to our ice cream example, if I was to walk into the ice cream farm near to us, they have dairy-free chocolate ice cream. If they decided to remove that from their assortment, it would be very unlikely that demand would transfer to the regular chocolate ice cream, obviously, because there are sort of health considerations there. So I think it's important, and this is where the CDT comes into play as well, because that gives us an indication of where that demand is likely to shift to, where are our switching levels. So it is incredibly important to be able to understand that and utilize that information in that decision-making process. And it's not just the sales preservation that's going to sort of impact, but also obviously customer retention, very closely linked. And it also has impact on the efficiency of the inventory. So again, if we are selling, for example, 100 units amongst two products and they're highly duplicative, then chances are we remove one of those products and we keep a high percentage of that total demand, those 100 units. So we're effectively driving through that remaining product quicker. So the inventory is turning over much, much quicker. So it's a really important factor to understand, which kind of brings me on to the topic of, well, how can you reliably understand that? Because we can't go and ask every single customer that walks through the doors, well, what would you do if your chocolate ice cream wasn't available? Or what would you do if your Rocky Road was not available? So we have to kind of make almost a best estimation based on data. Now, one of the most common ways to do that is through loyalty data, and it's absolutely a valid way to calculate that. So we can see from customer shopping patterns what they're buying on a regular basis, and then if we know that a particular product is out of stock or is being discontinued, how do their shopping habits change? It's a good method for it. The downside is not every retailer has it. It is liable to quite a few restrictions from a data privacy point of view, because it is sort of, there's a lot of it that is very personal data. It's also can be sometimes quite difficult to get hold of as well. So what we're working on at the moment is a real sort of cutting edge way to calculate this demand transference. So we are using some of the latest advancements in artificial intelligence to read in T-log data or basket data. And we're reading those into our AI model, and it's what it's starting to do is then calculate the demand transference using that data. And if we if we have time at the end of the session, I can perhaps go into that in a bit more detail. But that is the way that we're approaching this particular problem, and it is super important. And when we speak to retailers all over the globe, this is one of the first questions we get asked: is, how can we calculate it, and what is the impact of it?
Thank you, Jake, is it a dream? Is it hope? Is it, is it real? Do you have any real examples from the real world that they can show us the results from this?
Absolutely. And so this example I want to talk to you about it. What I really like about this one is, assortment is a very personal and difficult process to really kind of augment and improve on. We've seen a lot in the industry, just a lot of failed assortments, and part of that is technology, and part of that also is the organization. And what I like about this example here is the retailer. So it's a pet retailer. They started with one category, and that allowed them to get this in place, learn from it from an organizational standpoint, get buy-in from leaders, buy-in from the team with the great results that they saw, and then now they're starting to kind of expand that out to their other categories. But they actually saw a over 2% increase in their sales year over year, and also an increase in inventory turn. And so by seeing that happen with one category, that allowed them to, one, increase those sales by removing items, by being able to overface those items, give them options and bring in new things. But also that inventory turn, I think, is really key too, especially in today's climate. You think about high interest rates and the cost of money and cost of capital. Being able to turn your inventory more effectively means more money in your dollars that you can go and chase things that you need to that are more important. So they saw these great results, got buy-in from leadership, buy-in from the team. Now they're going through and rolling this out. And I think it's a really effective way to consume something like assortment rationalization organization effectively. If you kind of try and sometimes do that big bang and bring everybody on board all at once, a lot of times there can be a lot of tensions. So I think that's a really good use case, really interesting way that they approached it to ultimately get a lot of benefit from.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that, Jake. Well, before we finish, what else should people be talking about when we think about assortment rationalization? Do you have any final thoughts on this? Like, why is it so important for them?
Start out.
You want to go there, Jake?
Yeah. So I had a couple comments, and then Jay, you can kind of add on. I think assortment rationalization is really part of that broader assortment process. And assortment really is, I think, the way that we speak to our customers. We're in the business of really filling their needs and making sure that when they come into the store, they have what they're looking for. And so I think really at its core, assortment rationalization is all about that and putting the customer first and making sure that they have what they're ultimately looking for. So I think an effective assortment rationalization process, make sure that your customers want to come in and shop your stores.
Yeah, and just to follow on from that, assortment is that one element that touches the category review process all the way from the very start to the very end. And what I'd say is leverage that fact. That it is why assortment is so inherently complex, because it touches so many different areas. It can have so many different stakeholders that be involved in that, which on one sense can be extremely sort of daunting and complex. But actually, we see a real advantage of that, leveraging and utilizing the data from the different areas that assortment touches. So, for example, space. One of the most common pain points that we hear all the time is the assortment gets sent to the space planners, it doesn't fit. Or perhaps there is some decision the space planners need to make and they don't have the information. So being able to provide the space information at the point of planning the assortment or rationalizing the assortment reduces a lot of friction, a lot of toing and froing between those two different areas. And that's not just limited to space. Also it has links to macro space. It also has links to pricing and promotions and clearance, and amongst many, many others. So I think it's really important to leverage the data from those different areas, such as forecasts, such as space and pricing, and use all of that data in a unified way to make sure that retailers are making the best and most informed decisions that they can.
Thank you. Thank you both. We have one question in the chat from Yusuf. I'm sorry for my Latina accent, so I hope I said your name properly. He's asking, not I've seen many retailers struggling between the operational efficiency of SKUs, especially when they are increasing, versus profitability versus the shelf space. What do you suggest is the best way to approach this in the fashion retail? Well, however, I think that it applies for different industries, not only fashion, but what do you think about it?
Do you want to go, Jake, or?
Sure. I can take a start at it. I think the basics and kind of are called the foundational kind of basics of assortment rationalization, I think kind of apply here. There is going to be the blend of ultimately what you're trying to achieve. If I'm trying to capture new customers versus kind of serve my existing customers, there's always that tension, I think, between that. But I think it's being really clear on what your goals are, on what's most important to you. But as we talked about earlier with assortment rationalization, it's part of it's that profitability, but also the space, and then ultimately, what is the customer looking for? So it's trying to really look at all those in conjunction and figure out what the right balance is for the category and for your organization, I think, as a whole, of what lever do I want to pull on most, because I'm probably not going to be able to achieve everything that I want to ultimately across those different components. So, Jay, I don't know, other thoughts you want to maybe add on to that? It's a tough question.
Yeah, no, I think you sort of answered that quite well. And I don't mean to sit on the fence here, but I think it is finding the right balance depending on what is perhaps the strategic goals of the business, or particularly the category. Of course, I would always side with sort of profitability and customer satisfaction. I think they're the sort of the two key things. So, that you talk there about the operational efficiency that leads into your sort of profitability. So keeping it profitable and keeping customers happy, I think, are the core levers that I would pull there. And yes, there will always be a balance between the two. We always say there's an art and a science in assortments planning, and I think that's a good example of that.
Thank you both. Thank you, Jay and Jake, for your interesting perspective about assortment rationalization. Well, as you mentioned before, SKU proliferation, online shopping, space constraints are just some of the reasons why retailers should reinforce the way they work with their assortment rationalization processes, to include powerful features such as demand transference and product profitability and customer satisfaction. So thank you to our guests who joined today. Thank you for watching us. And please remember that RELEX Talks is a monthly episode airing on the second Wednesday of every month at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. So join us on July 10th for our next episode, where we will discuss dealing with uncertainty with top experts Madhav Dorva and the incredible Greg Wilson, and they will be hosted by the lovely Casey McSherry. So thank you and goodbye.